So now we're going to use JSON to build a very simple chat application. I love to use chat applications to play with JSON because really they are, and there are so many better ways to build a chat application than the way I'm building it. I'm just using this as a great way to talk about JSON. So what we're really going to end up doing here is we're going to have two windows, and each of them, each of them will be doing the same thing. And they both have a chat button. There's a back end. And when we press the submit and send a new chat message back, the other one is in a loop. And it's polling. It's checking to see if there's new chat messages. And when there is a new chat message, it uses AJAX to pull that back. The chat message is an array of JSON objects. And then it updates this part here. And so that's the idea of JSON, is that we can use JavaScript to update some part of the screen and leave the rest of the screen alone. And so it's not like this whole screen has to blink. Now, when we're doing things like making menus at the top and moving back and forth, we make it look like certain things are not changing. But in this situation, everything outside that little chat box is not changing. We're going to do a full request response cycle when you type in something and press the chat button. So that's the basic idea of this application. So here is how it's working basically. You see, if you watch the network, every few seconds, about 4 to 5 seconds, it's doing a retrieval. So it does a retrieval, does a retrieval, does a retrieval. And what it's getting is a JSON array of little messages. And then it reads this array and then it displays them. It wipes this window out using jQuery and then it redisplays the messages. And in this case, it's not really getting the new message, it's just getting all the message and it's just rewriting the whole thing. And so if you got to watch to make sure that you see the new message is coming. So here's a bit of code in urls.py. We have just the main view to do the talking. And then the messages is just going to be our bit of JSON stuff, okay? And our model.py, it's pretty simple. It's got an owner. We're going to use the owner pattern, even though we're going to do a little bit more of the work ourselves. And it has a text field, and that's pretty much it, other than the stock date fields that we normally have. So if we take a look at the views.py, we're going to do simply a rendering of talk.html. You'll see when we get to talk.html that the dynamic part, you might be surprised, like, where are all the old messages? The old messages normally would be retrieved right in here, but they're not, because we're going to do that in JavaScript. And that bit of like retrieve the messages, the most recent messages, is going to be done in the browser now rather than in the server. So it's going to be a request to show the page, and then the page is going to start and go grab the messages. And we just have a normal form, and we're going to grab the message text from that form, and then add the owner to be request user, and then save it, and then we're going to redirect back to ourselves. And so that's the view, and that's really quite simple. The interesting part is in the template, and so we have a bunch of stuff in the template. This part here is pretty straightforward. We have that form that's at the top, and the form is at the top, and we got leaving, we got reset, we got a chat button, we're going to post back in, and then we have this chat content, and that's important because the chat content is that part on the screen that we're going to replace over and over and over again. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're going to grab a spinner and grab a URL to a little spinner that we've got stored in a static area. And that spinner, you know, one of those little dot, 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 dot things that goes round and around, that's just an animated GIF. And what we're going to be doing is you put that out so that if it turns out that somehow your JSON is not working, the spinner stays there, and that's kind of a clue to you, at least as a developer, and maybe to your poor end user, that it's not running. But the idea is that spinner will be running, but then it'll immediately be replaced by the data we pull in from JSON. So here's the interesting part. This is a function that right now it's just going to call a function, and we'll get this started up in a bit. This function is going to do the hard work. The function is the part that's going to get triggered every once in a while to go retrieve all of the data. So we'll just call this function update message, and what it's going to do is it's going to go give us a console log, and Then we're going to grab get JSON, which is a jQuery to retrieve a JSON URL. And then this get JSON takes two parameters. The first is a string, which is a URL. The second is a bit of code. And then the data that comes back from the JSON, meaning this data right here, which is an array of arrays, is going to be passed in as rows. So, you know, until you're really comfortable, I put a console.log so you see each time it's called. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do chat content empty, and remember the chat content is that little part right there that we're going to wipe that out. That's just a jQuery to wipe it out. And then I'm going to loop through the rows. Yeah, we're going to loop through the rows. For var, we're going to loop, there's two rows here. Rows.length is 2, and then we're going to grab it, and then we're going to say, we're going to append a paragraph tag in the first part of the row, plus a break tag and 2 non-blank spaces. That's so that it indents 2 spaces. That's the time underneath the text. And then we're going to take the second element of that row and print out a paragraph tag. And so that's what is going to put the rows of the chat. That's going to wipe it out and then fill it back up. We'll just append it. Append around and around and around and go through and append. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set the timeout to call ourselves again in 4 seconds. So that basically says this is actually part of vanilla JavaScript, and we're saying 4,000 milliseconds from now, or 4 seconds from now, call this again. And so it's only going to do this after it has successfully got the JSON back. And so if the system starts slowing down, after it's done the update of the little part of the screen with the chat messages, then it's going to say, and then run me again in 4 seconds. And that's what's going to happen every 4 seconds. But then what we're going to do is also, after that, we're going to trigger that we're going to get this thing started. And so we're going to say, under document ready, there's the document ready, these 3 lines, we're going to tell Ajax not to cache that data because we expect every time we're going to call, we want the new messages. We're going to call update message, which is immediately going to start an Ajax request and then rewrite chat content and then wait 4 seconds and then do it again and again. And so this is like priming our timing loop. Okay? And then once we've done that, the only thing left to do is look at what is going to happen in that code that's going to give us back all those Ajax messages. So this is the talk messages. That's our URL that's going to do that. It's a get request, and we're just going to go read all of the message objects ordered by created at, the first 10 of them. So that's what that does. And we're going to, instead of just sending the messages down, we're going to augment it. And so we're going to take the message text, and then we're calling natural time. Natural time is the thing that says 13 minutes ago or 14 minutes ago instead of some long, ugly time thing. And that's something we're getting from Django. And so that is the result. The results is a new array. Messages is an array, and results is the array that looks like this. And what we've done is we've changed this second parameter basically for each of the messages using natural time. And then results, in this case, is an array. Actually, it's a list. I'm confusing my JavaScript and my Python. We're in Python right now, and so it's a list. And then we just return a JSON response, which serializes that into JSON and sends it all back. So you kind of get the idea of how you build a chat, and you can see how this is what's coming back, and it's hitting this messages, and this little cache equals false is adding this so that the URL does not seem to be the same URL from the browser's perspective. So it's really just taking a timestamp and appending it so the browser sees it not as the URL it retrieved before, so it doesn't have. Hello, and welcome to another Django for Everybody code walkthrough. We're going to do another walkthrough of a different part of the chat application. And so this time we're going to actually do some chatting. And I probably won't need this now. So this chat is really designed to run simultaneously. So normally this would be 2 different logged in users. This chat doesn't really do anything particularly for logged in users. So I'm just going to use 2 windows logged in as the same user, but
So the idea is, and we can see this going on right now, if we do a Tools Developer Console, we can just watch. We can watch this, clear it, and you'll see that every 4 seconds it's making a request and it's getting some JSON back. Requesting JSON, yeah, I got it. Requesting JSON, I got it. And then we can watch in this other window at the same time. Clear this. Every 4 seconds, it's going to do an AJAX request, requesting JSON. Now, if we watch the Network tab, we can see what it's doing. It's requesting JSON. Now, the page is not refreshing. What's happening is, in the background, in JavaScript, it's actually talking to the server, okay? And it's doing that every 4 seconds, and it's doing the same thing in both of them. So this is a polling application. You know, these could be on completely different computers. It's polling to see if any new messages have shown up. So I'm going to say new message. Now, this is just a traditional form, and this is going to submit. So you'll see a post redirect that happens here. Boom, boom, post redirect. I'll come back to that. And then that new message already appeared just because the timing was perfect, right? And so I typed it in on this one, and it worked. So here is the post. It posted that message, headers, parameters. It sent new message, and it sent the CSRF middleware token. And then the post did a redirect back to talk, and then it showed the messages. So this reset, cancel, chat, this is just a standard form. I guess let's just take a look at the page source here. This form is a standard form. It just is submitting it. It's submitting it with a post, and it's just standard stuff with a CSRF middleware token, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the posting of new messages is not the tricky part of this. So let's walk through the simple posting of new messages. Talk, the /talk goes into my views.py, and so this is my talk main. And I guess I should probably, yeah, I don't need this one anymore. Let's take a look at the models file. Take a look at the model file. So there is a data model for this. It is a one-to-many. We got text fields. We got a primary key. Everybody can put more fields in so that we do know who they're owned by, so that we know who is allowed. Yeah, we do have an owner, but we don't have any trashing, so we don't have any delete. This is really quite simple at this point. And so we got the 2 fields created at and updated. Of course, are handled on automatically. So do not worry about this bit right here. That's just so that for my online system, all it's doing is it's throwing away chat messages that are more than 60 minutes old. You could put code in there like this, but this really doesn't implement it. It just is something because of samples that's online. Don't worry about that. What it's really doing here is just rendering chat/talk.html. Okay, so that's what the GET request is. So that means if we just hit enter here, I'll come here, hit enter here, that's what happens. Okay, and then a few seconds later, I get the messages show up. But you'll also notice that when I just hit enter and I do a GET request to that page, for a little while I see a spinning GIF. Okay, and so that all happens here in chat/talk.html. But before we leave the view, it's pretty straightforward. When we hit the chat button here, it's going to send a post data and the name of this form. Inspect element, that's what I wanted. The name of this thing is a name message, right? And so I'm going to say post message, request post message, and I'm going to set the owner field. This is just a model, message model. Then I'm going to store it, and I'm going to redirect back to the GET request. All right. So that's how I do cool new message, and that's what happens when I press this button. Now we're going to find out how in this other tab, boom, cool new message shows up 2 seconds ago, right? I did nothing in here other than navigate to the tab. And now we want to see how that all works. So let's talk first about the HTML. It comes down here. This is the source as created, and this is the template that creates the source. It's a pretty straightforward template. You know, we got some chat main. The chat static is a little bit weird. And so let's take a look at how that works. That is this line 63. Chat static generates this. And if I look at my URLs, I'm mapping the static to something that's in a folder. So let's pop up a thing, ls-l. So in static, there's a single file called spinner.gif. And if I take a look at what spinner.gif, I think this will open it in. Yeah, so spinner.gif is just an animated GIF image of this little spinner. Also looks kind of like a Walmart logo. And so if you look at the page that's generated from the view source, and we've been sitting here for minutes now, but if you look at what originally came from the server, you see that there was, didn't need to click there. Let's do it again. View source, come down. Here on line 62, what came from the server was HTML that put that spinner out, okay? And that just is our way. So I've put this spinner here in case the JSON Ajax doesn't work. Because if it were to blow up, right? If it were to blow up, that thing would run there. Now I've artificially slowed this down, and I'll show you how I did that, just to let that spinner show for 1001, 1002, boom, now it's gone. I could make that speed up a lot by changing this chat talk, but just understand that we often fill the areas that we're going to replace with a spinner so that if something goes wrong, we have given our users a clue. Okay? So then we're going to build function update message, and it's probably easier to look at it in view source. So oh dang it, I did it again. I didn't mean to click on that. There we go. So update message. So $getJSON takes one parameter /chat/messages, which of course is the URL for chat::messages, which maps to urls.py, chat::messages, which is talk messages view, which is, we don't need this anymore. That's this view right here, talk messages. We're going to make it be a login required mix-in, and then we're going to read all the messages by looking at our message model, message objects all, order by, descend and create, add, and give me the first 10. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to call this natural time. Natural time is a really cool little Django feature that gives us times, and it says 7 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, rather than some big long time that looks like with long dates and February 22nd, Wednesday, 2020, or whatever it is, right? So I could send messages here into, I could send the messages back, but then I would have to convert these into prettier things, but I want to convert these inside of Django because I have this wonderful utility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through the message array that I got back, and I'm going to return, I'm going to make a new array, and it's an array of arrays basically, and it's a two thing where I got the text of the message and a pretty version of the time, and then I append that to the array, and then I return the array. So I'm returning an array. Now it turns out an array of arrays. It turns out that having the outer result, having the outer thing be an array is actually sort of tacky, but it's really supposed. So if we look at, for example, we go to the network, and we look at this, and we look at the response, we see that it is an array of arrays, right? Let me make this so I can click better on it, right? It's an array. The outer object, the outer thing in our JSON is an array, and then I've got just a linear list of arrays. And there's 2 items in each array. One is the time, one is the text, and the other is the time. And so this message payload that's coming back, this is that results. And of course, JSON response serializes it, and then we're going to see how we deserialize it, right? And I think I might be able to open this in a new window. Can I open? Yes, I can. So I've got this opened. If I look at the raw data, that's what the raw data looks like. If I look at the parsed JSON, it's an array with 0 and 1 and 0 and 1. And if I look at the headers, it, of course, is application/JSON. And all that work of producing the response is here in talk messages, where we create a data structure inside a variable inside of Python, and then we just serialize it and send it out using Django's built-in response. Okay, so that shows how we put messages in. That shows how we feed messages out in the format of JSON. Now let's talk about how we get those messages into the screen. Okay, and that's this update message. So update message is just a function. We'll eventually, in document ready, we're going to say, hey, Ajax, don't cache the messages. And so what that's doing is adding this little number that changes. It's really just the time, but that means that the browser is not supposed to, sometimes when the browser sees the same URL over and over and over again, it's like, oh, I already got a copy of that. And we're like, no, don't let us. So we're saying, don't cache it, put a little thing on it so the URL is actually changing. It's just, this question mark is like a query parameter, and it forces the URL to change. Then what we're going to do is we're going to wait 2 seconds and then call update message. We could call update message right here if we were in a hurry, but I'm going to wait because set timeout is vanilla JavaScript that basically says run this code, run this code, and it's a string with code in it. But hey, it's JavaScript, and code and data are kind of equivalent. And wait 2 seconds, 2,000 milliseconds. So this right here. Instead, I could say update message right now, and then it would start immediately. But this set timeout is why when I press refresh, I get to see my cool little spinny thing for a few seconds, then it's too late. Okay. So otherwise, I would just call update message. Got it? Okay, now, at some point, this timer will expire, 2,000 seconds will expire, and then it will call update message. So, 2 seconds later, it starts calling this code. And so you see it says requesting JSON, and then it calls jQuery to ask for some JSON, and it calls chat/messages, parses it all, deserializes it all, and then calls my code with the resulting messages. The resulting messages, all those messages, which is an array of arrays, passed in as the variable rows. And I immediately console log it. So now if I'm going to go look at the console logging, I can say, what's coming back? Oh, it's an array. How come there's only one? How come there's only... Oh, okay. Yeah, it's an array. And in that was 3 minutes ago. How come I'm not seeing all the rest of it? Maybe it's only showing me... Yeah, it's only showing me the first one, but there you go. So I'm console logging it. I put these console logs in just because I'm so nervous all the time. Did it really work? Am I really running my code? Because the browser, when it blows up, is really quite silent, right? Very, very silent. Okay, let's go back and take a look at the web developer network. Yada, yada. Okay, so at some point, I am gotten called. I log it. Then what I do is I go up to chat content, which has initially it has the spinner on it, and then I empty it out. That's jQuery, just empty it out, and then I go through and I loop through all the rows, which might be 0. If it is 0, then you're going to see nothing. And then I'm going to grab the row sub I, which that's each row has 2 things in it, and then the message is the sub 0 element, and the time is the sub 1 element. And I'm just using jQuery append to throw a little paragraph in with that text. So if you were to do an inspect element here, you would see that this is a paragraph. Oh, come back, chat content. So let's see if we can catch it. We might catch it emptying it out and then filling it back up. Doesn't look like we're going to catch it. But basically, it wipes all this stuff out. Oh, there it did. You see what it did? So here it is, and now it's going to wipe it out and then fill it back up with the same thing. Okay? So you'll see how it does an empty of that whole div, and then it fills it back up. And so we can see it. Here comes, emptied out, and then fill it back up. And it's got the same stuff. Now what's happening is it's all happening so quick that we don't see any flicker or anything here. But every 4 seconds, this is being rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. Oh, and you'll notice that my selection died because it's not the same. It's not the same text anymore. It's not selected because it got deleted. I selected something and it's about to get deleted. Here goes, deleted, come back. Oh, and you'll also notice the 11 minutes changed. So, and at the end of this, when it's successfully returned, we say, well, run me again 4 seconds from now. So the set timeout, once it runs it, it's one time. There's another way in JavaScript to say run this every 4 seconds. But I actually prefer waiting for it to succeed because it turns out, and I'm not going into it in great detail, but these things can have errors. And then you can put extra code in here to handle errors. But what I'm doing here is I'm only running this if it is successful. And so I'm only running it again. Why bother? And if it is slow, because this is asynchronous code, it takes a while, in this case a zillionth of a second, it takes a while between the time it starts the request and the time it gets the data back and calls our code. But let's just say that the server was overloaded. It might take 2 seconds between the start of the request and the call of the code. And so this just says that if it's it'll be 6 seconds everything, because if it's slow, I'm going to only add 4 more seconds. So I wait till it's all done, I wait till I get my data, and then I say, okay, run me again in 4 seconds. Now, this ultimately is a very simple polling application, which is inefficient, and there is a technology called WebSockets that makes this a whole lot better. But we'll talk about that perhaps some other day. Cheers. Hello and welcome to another walkthrough for Django for Everybody. In this particular walkthrough, we're going to play with the favicon. And so the favicon is a special little icon that shows up at your root /favicon.ico. There's a whole series of favicons, but this is sort of the original classic one. And you should be able to see it. And it's also what happens in your bookmarks or your little tabs. And so it's kind of a fun little way to brand your site. And if you've been grabbing my code, you have got a favicon sitting here in Django's home static favicon.ico. And if you look at urls.py down later, it adds a path using the static file server, and it sort of goes to the base directory of the Django application and adds home static. And then if there's a path that matches, this is the path that matches, then this is the file that it looks up, and then that serves up the contents of that file at favicon.ico. Now, what you want to probably do is make your own favicon. So let's go ahead and make our own favicon. Here is a favicon converter, and let's go ahead and grab a file. Let's see, Sakiger. Going to make a little Sakiger icon instead. And so I did it. It converted it to an icon. Let's see what we got here. And I'm going to download a zip file with a bunch of icons, and it'll go into my downloads. So here it came into my downloads. It's already downloaded it, and that is an icon. And so an icon is a special kind of an image. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to upload and overwrite this with a new file. And so here we go. I'm going to upload that favicon. And I believe it's uploaded right this second. Now, here's a weird thing. Now I should be able to go here and I should be able to press refresh. I don't think reloading my application is going to make much difference at this point, but icons are heavily cached by the browser. So one thing to do is just, ooh, I didn't mean to start that. Didn't mean to start Camtasia. Sorry, didn't mean to start that. So I can go here in a different browser and I can see the icon. or I can add a get parameter, and then I can see that icon, x equals 3, and now I can see the icon. So if you come here and you press refresh, what you'll find is these icons are heavily cached. And that's just because you don't want to overload the server getting an icon on every page. So to really do this right, the way to force the cache, and we've seen this like in JSON, you can add a get parameter x equals 42, and that basically says it's going to ignore this, and it's just going to get, because that's a query parameter, it's not part of the path, and it's going to load the new icon. So it might take a while before you're going to see that icon show up, and so don't feel too bad. If you can do this thing where you go directly and you add this question mark, you should be able to see your brand new icon. And then later, or maybe if you run with a different browser, but if you've used a different browser and it's got a cached icon, away it goes. And you can go Google how to clear the favicon on my browser, and you'll find it's not trivial. So this is the way that I do it. I just add a get parameter, and then that does it. So I hope this little favicon walkthrough was helpful to you. Cheers. Hello, and welcome to another walkthrough for Django for Everybody. In this walkthrough, we're going to look at social login. And we're going to use GitHub to do our login. And we're going to use a piece of code called Social Login Framework. And you can read this. This is the link documentation to social login. You can read through all this stuff. But I've actually, in my home, I've already done most of this. And if you based some of your stuff on the settings, so if you've been using my code for a while, every time you say manage.py, it says if you want to use social login, please see this file and which registration it's doing. And so we're actually going to, it's not really broken, but you'll notice now I'm going to show you where these messages are coming from and what we are about to change. So bring this one over here. So first off, where those messages are coming from is down here deep in the settings.py, about line 176. It's going to import from GitHub settings.py. And GitHub settings.py is a file, but this file doesn't yet exist. So if you go into DJ Free Samples, you will see that there is a GitHub settings dist, but there is not a GitHub settings.py. So this blows up, and otherwise, it prints that message. So there's where that message happens. And so if you look at the documentation, we're going to put the GitHub OAuth 2 backend, etc., etc. Okay? So what we need to do basically is we need to take this file. There is a file called GitHub settings dist.py, and we have to make a new empty file called GitHub settings py. So create that new empty file. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just take all of this and we're going to paste it into it. So from the dist. So this idea of a file with a dist name, that means it's kind of the distribution file. It's not the real file. And so I'm just going to save this file for now. Now the problem, and so if I go here, back here, I believe that at this point it won't say anything because we have a file, right? And it says we've switched to using, it was using login, and now it's using login social. And so the login is a registration template. So this was the login that you've been using until you turn the social on. And it has some rules that says, you know, here's where you do the URL, you get a form, etc. So you get to set this login. This is a long time ago that we set this thing. But social login, if you read all the documentation, read all this documentation, social login, you have a different way of doing it. So this is asking if that social auth GitHub key has been set properly, and that's this key right here, and otherwise it's not set. So if it gets set, then it's going to do a link to this social begin GitHub. And this is something that's documented in this Django framework. So where somewhere in here is the begin. Yeah, so this is an example of how you call Google. So you do this social colon begin. And this social, going back to settings.py, oh, we got to go into the urls.py. So let me go here and then go into urls.py. So there we do add something here, and that is that we switch to social login. We try to import that same GitHub settings, and if we do get GitHub settings, we switch to using the different template, and you say template name, and then use that as social for our social login. Okay, and then it prints out this little error message. Okay, so that redirects to social login, and we also have OAuth, the social namespace social for the social Django URLs. Now that social Django URLs is configured by some of those settings. Okay. Okay, so we have this file called github settings.py, but we can't use GitHub yet because we have to get a key and a secret. And so the instructions are right here. So we go to GitHub developer settings. Now I'm not going to show you the ones I'm using for the projects or the samples, but what you do is you just add a new OAuth app. My cool app samples. And I give you some example things to put in here. So this home page is really samples dj4e.com. Samples, and then you've got to set the login, and this is what you're going to need, although I got to update it. The application, I got to change this to be samples.dj4e.com. Okay, and then I register the application, and now I have an ID and a secret. Don't worry, I'm going to delete this later. So then what you do is you go into settings, not settings dist, and then you go in and you paste that in, and then you paste this secret in. I hope I got the secret right. Yeah, this secret. So now I save it, right? So I save it, and let me go into my web tab, because this is my pay account. And I'm going to go samples and reload samples. I'll just go over here and I'll do a manage.py check. And I hope everything is right still, but it's a good test. And it is using the social login, and it looks fine. Okay, so I've got that. Now let's just see what happens when I say log out. And now if I say log in, I get this login with GitHub because I set that. So if all goes well, I should be able to log into GitHub. Now what's happening is GitHub is asking Charles Severance, me, the logged in user, whether or not to share the data to my cool app samples. Okay, so I'm going to authorize it, and then it's going to send back, and then I'm logged in. And interestingly, now it knows who I am. It's a GitHub account. And like if I go into, oh, where are we at? Where's the menus at? Menu, because that is based on that email account. That's a gravatar that's based on the email account. So now I'm logged in, and away it works. So that's the basic idea. It really comes down to create this GitHub settings, use the GitHub settings dist. And away you go. Yeah, the GitHub settings dist, and you copy that into GitHub settings, and then you put your real account in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back and delete this application so you can't use my keys. Now it's not going to work anymore. Okay, so there I go. So I hope this was helpful to you, that walk you through a little bit of what it takes to get GitHub authentication working. I would observe that the reason I chose GitHub is that you can do the same with Twitter and you can do the same with Google, but they're a lot, they don't trust you as much, and so you have to do a lot more work to prove to them that you're worthy of using Google and Twitter instead of or Facebook. Those are all much higher bars to get permission to use it. GitHub is really easy. So hope this was helpful. Cheers. Hello and welcome to another of the sample code walkthroughs on Django for Everybody. This particular sample walkthrough is the favorite things. You can see the source code here in favs. Hopefully you have, like I do, the whole source code of this entire DJ-free samples checked out somewhere, maybe on your local computer or maybe on a separate Python Anywhere website in a way that you can watch it. And if you don't have that, you can play with these samples here at samples.dj4e.com. I'm going to run my local copy. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing. We're really demonstrating many-to-many accounts, but in this case we're also demonstrating Ajax. And I can show you how Ajax works at a high level. So normally if I click on, raindrops on roses and all things, you see an entire request response cycle. You see lots of things going on here. And if I click on this, I go up to here, the very first page is a bunch of HTML that came out, and then the rest of it is like the Bootstrap, etc., that was loaded by that page. So you have to kind of scroll back up. But now I'm going to clear this. I'll go back to all things. So that was one page with lots of sort of derivative stuff. But what we're going to do in this is when we hit this favorite button, we're not going to see a full screen refresh. We've got some JavaScript code in here that's going to make this, when I click on it, it's going to make it filled in. But it's also going to have to update something in the database so that it remembers that this is one of my favorite things for the logged in user. So I'm going to hit it, and you see that I hit this favorite, and that called a view inside the server, which updated the state. And now if I refresh the whole page, it's going to show it to me, and it's remembered this, right? So I refresh the entire favorite list. And if I add a new one, whiskers on kittens, this is just a normal bit of code that's not that different. Sound of music. So like this one I've got a favorite, this one I don't have a favorite, right? I don't have that favorited. But Ajax is the way that we can it's just JavaScript and jQuery that's updating the UI, but we can change data on the server by just hitting a URL, in this case with a post request. So if we look at this, it actually sent a post request. If you recall, we're not supposed to change the server state on a GET request. So this is, to not be tacky, we're going to send a post request. And again, if you see this in the source, which we will, you don't want a spider to go down these GET requests. They'll see these URLs in the JavaScript, and we just hope, and they won't do it because they see it's a post request. So if I hit refresh now, the data has been updated. So if I take a quick look at the admin user interface, admin, and I look at favs, this is my well, let me just stay here, right? So this means that the user, DJ4E, likes raindrops. And so if I do a refresh here, so that means that me, the logged in user, DJ4E, likes this. Now, if I say I would also like whiskered on kittens, it's going to update the database, see there? And then if I come over here, I can hit refresh, and you see that DJ4E likes raindrops. And it's just a many-to-many table with an outward connection to raindrops on roses, and another outward connection to the user DJ4E. Now I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this from within the administration. Now this is exactly what the undelete button does. Now, the state of the system doesn't know that I deleted this in the background, but if I hit refresh, you see it now knows that it's deleted, and because it actually went and it queried all those tables, and there was really only one favorite. Okay? So let's take a look at the way this kind of comes together. We will eventually get back to all this JavaScript. So let's start with the models. The model, yeah. So thing, of course, has some title, like a lot of things, some text. We have a foreign key into owner because we want to be able to mark these things as belonging to somebody. This owner right here indicates who owns it, i.e. who will get the edit and delete, just like everything we've done that does that. Favorites is the new bit we're adding. And so we're basically saying, okay, we're going to, so this foreign key is a one-to-many, right? Because that's one user to many things. But this is the many-to-many. And this is also to auth user. Normally many-to-many is 3 tables, the kind of the left table, the right table, and the middle table. Well, in this case, we got the one table, but the right table, as it were, is the user model itself. And that's okay, because the user model is a table, and all we're doing with settings.auth user model is knowing what table that is. And of course, the created at and updated at and the title, that does. So this is our through model, and of course, when you're in the middle of a foreign key, you effectively have a foreign key to the left and a foreign key to the right. And so this is like, we have a foreign key back to thing, and that's a one-to-many relationship. And then we have a foreign key to the users, and that's a one-to-many relationship. In this case, the onDelete models equals cascade means if a thing is deleted and there's a fav row that references the thing, the fav rows that reference the thing will be deleted. And the same is true for if a user gets deleted, all the fav rows except. So either side, either left or the right of this, we could, if one of those records goes, the corresponding records in fav will be deleted. And you can either delete things or you can delete users, and the fav rows are sort of automatically maintained. Now the one thing we're doing here is a little different than what we did in the comments one, is we've added this unique together. And that simply means that you can't insert more than one combination of a thing and a user. So it's not like you can favorite it a lot. If you keep hitting favorite, there's only one row. If there's a row in here that exists, i.e. right here, if this row exists and it connects the two, then it's favorited. So in the other examples, you'll notice that we modeled something at this connection. This is really a pure many-to-many. And this unique together basically says the only data that matters is the actual connection between thing and user. And this is just kind of a little fancy way to make it so that the admin user interface looks really cool. Right? DJ4E likes whiskers. That's what you're doing with these string classes. Okay? So, of course, you'll do your migrations when you get that. That's already taken care of. Let's take a look at a couple of things. Let's just start with urls.py. Make it a little smaller so it sort of fits better, a little wider. There we go. So this looks very similar to a lot of things that we've done. We've got a main view, we got a detail view, we got a create view, delete view. So those are all sort of, we've talked about those before and we've used those. This is the new thing here. And so this is the URL that we're going to hit if we're going to do a favorite or an unfavorite, and it is the primary key of the thing. And that's why I name this thing/thing primary key. I might want to even call that thing PK, and then favorite, right? And then that's going to call the add favorite view. And of course, this thing favorite is just a way to reference it in templates and in views. And the same thing for unfavorite. And so we've got a little tiny add favorite view and a delete favorite view. And in terms of this, the only real code that we're going to change from previous examples is the list view, because the list view has to be augmented to actually show the little asterisks, and the list template has got to be augmented. As a matter of fact, the most complex bit of this is the list view, and these two have got to be added as well. So let's take a quick look at the views. Let me go ahead and cd templates /favs. So let's start with our list view. Okay, and go a little larger. There we go. Here's our list view, and let's take a look at our list view. So the first thing is, because of that owner field, right, I am going to import the owner detail view, owner list view, and owner create view. And so I've got that, and actually I'm importing it from a different project. That's okay. This owner.py is in the myarts, but you might have it also locally. It'd be owner.py. So again, the whole idea here is that the owner field in the models, vi models.py, this owner field is managed, like in many of these, by us creating my /myarts owner. And basically we're creating this owner list view, the owner detail view, owner create view. And if you recall from these are the places where we've kind of overridden the original automatic create view, automatic update view, which we've used for lots of things, except when we're creating it, we've got to put the request user in right before we split the save into two pieces, and then we half save it, then we set the owner field, then we finish the saving, and then the update view and the delete view is more about the query set, and it basically says, I'm not going to let you retrieve this for update. That's what query set is. I'm not going to let you retrieve this for update unless you own it. And so that's what this is basically saying is, I'm going to also filter these based on the owner must be equal to the current logged in user. And this code right here, is exactly the same for delete. So what we're doing is loading the record prior to delete. And we're saying, look, if you don't own it, I'm not going to load it, which means you can't delete it because it gets a 404 not found. And so again, that's in the delete view and the update view, right? That's all here because it's going to do a get or 404, right? And so in there, it does a get 404. Again, this particular one, we got to do our own get or 404. And inside delete view and update view, it's going to do a get or 404, get object or 404. And then this code right here, if it's like ID equals primary key and owner equals self.request user, the answer is no, and so this is going to blow up, this delete view and update view. Now, that's just a review of stuff we've been doing for a couple of examples, so I'm not going to go into super great detail. So what I want to do is I want to show you thing list view. Now actually it does owner list view, but if you go back and look at owner list view, it doesn't really do anything other than the base one. But so it's basically looks like most of these, except what we've done is we've overridden the get request. So we're overriding the get request. And some of this is the stuff that's part of the default, meaning it always would go get thing list objects.all, and it would always pass into the template thing list. And if you take a look at the template, right, what it does is it checks to see if there's a thing list, then it loops through it, and then it prints all this stuff out. And literally, a lot of this is very similar to everything we've done with previous sample code, right? But the problem is we need to get the data so that we can know the starting value, whether these are supposed to be filled in or not, right? And so what we do is we say, okay, and we only gonna do that if they're authenticated, because if we're not logged in, if I log out, I don't have any favorites. I can't unfavorite thing, I can't favorite things because I'm not logged in. And so I don't do this, right? So if the user's authenticated, then I'm gonna do this. And it also means that in the template, all of this stuff, this is the favorite code, only happens and only shows if the user's authenticated. So I'll log in, DJ4E, log in, and now it's actually pulling this extra data. And so here we are in views. If the user's authenticated, let's go to the current logged in user and get a list of their favorite things, but only the ID field. Now, this would give you a list of objects, and each object would be ID:1, ID:2, ID:3. And so we use a bit of list comprehension so that I end up with a favorites that's just a list of the IDs of the things for which I have a favorite. So in this case, if this is like thing 1 and this is thing 4. And so in this list, that list will be just 4 because 4 is favorited and 1 is not. So I might have 50 of these, and you might only have 2 of them favorited. And when it's all said and done, this favorites list, if you printed it out, okay, let's print it out. Print favorites. Print that out, and you will see, let me hit refresh here, and then go over to my run server, and it's a list with the number 4 in it. So 4 is a favorite and 1 is not a favorite. If I hit this and then I hit refresh and I look at this print, you'll see that 4 and 1 are my favorites, right? And then if I unfavorite 4 and I hit refresh, you will see that 1 is the favorite, okay? Now that then drives into that, and that just is passed right here into the template, yeah? And then we have this new stuff in the template. Now we're in the middle of looping through all the things, which this is the loop that goes through all those things. But here we are in the middle if the user is authenticated. And so we basically have some code. Anchor tag href equals # is our key that says don't actually go anywhere. And the onClick is the method, and that's going to call some JavaScript. And it's going to call as a parameter, see I got a single quote here, the URL for the thing unfavorite of thing ID. And I'm also passing thing ID as a parameter. So if you do a quick inspect element right here, inspect element, you see that onClick favPost, this is a URL to hit, and that's the ID. So I'm passing those in as parameters and then return false. We'll go through that JavaScript in a second. And I also give this an ID so that I can reference it down in that function that I'm going to build in a second. So that's here, ID equals favorite. Now, I need to decide whether or not to show which of these two to show. So it turns out that there's actually 2 stars. And what I'm really doing is I'm showing 1 star or the other. You don't notice that, but if you look down here, there are actually 2 stars. Here's 1 star, and here's the other star. So there's actually, I can see if I can convince it. If I can convince the, where is, oh, it's got to be here, display none. If I can change this to be display inline, you'll see that there's really 2 stars. And all I'm doing, now this is not going to be much, this is not going to work. I don't know how well this is going to work because I manually unhit it, but there's actually 2 stars, right? But what happens is that I hide the star that's filled and show the star that's filled appropriate. So let me refresh to get it so that, but there's 2 stars there. One is hidden and one is not. So it turns out that what this is this is 2 bits of making a star, and all I'm doing is I'm stacking 2 stars. I'm stacking an orange star on top of a blue outline star. And then what I'm doing it twice. So that's a link. But what I'm doing is if the current thing is in the favorite list, remember I did that? Then I'm going to add a style equals display none. And if, in this case, that one's, if it's not in the favorite list, I'm going to hide this one, right? This is the unfavorite, and this is the favorite. And if it's in favorites, I'm going to hide the favorite. So if it's already a favorite, I'm going to show the empty star that's got an unfavorite link. Show empty star. Show a full star with an unfavorite link underneath it. My mind gets all messed up on this. And then if it is in favorites, show a filled in star with an unfavorite. Yeah. Yeah. If it's not in favorites. Oh, right. I got, it's almost a double negative, right? If it's not in favorites, hide it. So this kind of flips, but okay. So this is an empty star that'll, if you click on it, favorites it, and this is a filled in star that if you click on it, unfavorites it. Okay? So let's take a look at this. Now then there's the tricky bit. The tricky bit is that when you click on the one that you can see, and in this case, the one I can see is this one, right? So I'm here, I can see this one. So it's going to click on fav post, passing in fav's thing unfavorite, where that is the key of the thing. Here's the whole thing, right? And passing in that number. We'll see what that's for in a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to the JavaScript that handles this. Okay, so now we got this function fav post, and you don't have to modify this. So this is the URL that we're going to post to. We're actually going to send no data to it, and then thing ID is our, so we can have a number. So this fetch is built into the browser. You may have to do what's called a polyfill for fetch if you have a really old browser, but we're not. And so those are called polyfills, things to say like, oh, this is Internet Explorer 10 or whatever, and I need X. So fetch basically takes the URL and then a object with method post, yada yada. You can go look all this up. You don't have to worry too much about it. Content type, and I'm not sending any data. And so this is a post with 0 data. And then the way this works is this fetch function starts the fetch, but then it delays it because it could take a long time to go across the internet, go through the server, and come back. And then what it does is it comes back and then calls this function when the response returns back to the browser. So this is the browser talking to the server, and then you split your code into 2 parts. The part that gets it started, and then the part that in effect asynchronously reacts to the finished. So that's why I'm saying log finished. So you see, oh, it finished. And then the next thing I do is I go grab those 2 little stars and I flip them. I hide them. If they're visible, I hide them. And if they're hidden, I make them visible. So unfavorite star thing ID, which means it comes back to this little guy here, and it just toggles them. So when I do this, it's actually hiding one and showing the other, hiding one and showing the other. I could have done this with differently, but that's really what's going on. And you can see the display none flipping back and forth down here as I flip it. And of course, it's also changing it in the server with the post request. So if I sit here and I look at the network, and I go unfavorite, favorite, unfavorite, favorite. And that's because as I'm showing it and hiding it, it's also toggling what happens when I click on it. If this is shown, then it's going to call unfavorite. Oh, this is now shown, it's going to call favorite. So the empty star is going to call favorite, and the filled in star is going to call unfavorite. Pretty cool, huh? I mean, you could probably come up with some better HTML, and so again, if you look at the console, this is quite nice. I got some debugging here, right? Favorite, favorite, finished. So that's actually going on here after the network shows when they start. Now the finish so fast it's hardly whatever, but then this shows when it finished. Okay, and so that's how you debug this. Now you might have problems on your own code when you're doing stuff like this. Okay, but in this you just don't have to change much. So that is probably the hardest part of this. But then the last thing that we've got to do is we've got to go into the views.py and handle these posts to favs, thing, favorite, finished, right? So we got to hit the posts. So if you take a look at URLs, I'm probably going to need models. Keep models up. URLs.py. So this is the routes. So it's really simple. Remember, this thing is the primary key of the thing ID, not the favorite ID. Favorite does have an ID, but we're not really using it. We're using the combination of the thing ID and the user ID, basically, as the index in the favorite. So we go find favorite view. It's down near the bottom. And so if you recall, most forms we require CSRF, and we could have put the CSRF in here, but it was a lot simpler to just make it CSRF exempt. You kind of have to decide on security whether or not it's okay. Like, I could write a code injection that would favorite a bunch of books for you. Is that really that dangerous? But you could make this more secure. But what I did is I made it CSRF exempt. Okay, and so if you go read to Stack Overflow, you have to import these things and then add this little thing that basically says, hey, we're not going to blow up CSRF. If you don't, these things will get 403s, I think, which is not allowed, but you don't want that. And then after that, this looks like pretty much any other thing. It's a login required mixin, which basically means a session has to be established. We're not really caring it. We're just extending a normal view. It turns out there's no UI to this. If you look at the response is empty. But that's okay because the damage has been done in the server as a result of the post. So we got a post method. We're overriding from view, and we're taking self and request, which we always get, and PK, of course, which is the second number, right? I guess it's in URLs, right? PK is whatever this second number is. It's that parameter. And we get PK as the parameter, come back, views. There we are. Print some stuff out. I'm going to load the thing that corresponds to the PK or blow up with a 404, right? So you can't just guess. I can't just say, you know, I can't, if I pick a PK that doesn't exist, nothing happens. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the old favorite. I'm going to create a new favorite, and I'm going to put to the left and the right the user value of favorite, right? So we're setting these two parameters right here. Setting thing and user. So thing is being set to the current thing we just loaded, which is got a primary key. And the user is the current logged in user. Now, we're going to save it, but we're going to do it in the try except block because what if there's already one there? And if you recall, you can't, because of unique together, you can't save the same combination of thing and user twice. And there's other ways I could have done this that are a little more complex, but I kept it simple. I just did a try and said it's okay if it blows up. That means it's already there. Because I don't let you really hit the favorite twice, but if you somehow could like click on this, if I could do an inspect element, and okay, and like so we're unfavorited. So, but I could unfavorite twice, right? All I'd have to do is somehow convince myself to grab this URL. It's not favorited, and you think, oh, don't do that. Well, the user can always like hand put this URL in. I just unfavorited it. What did I do wrong? Oh, too many favs. Come back. That's a second unfavorite. Well, I don't know why that blew up. Well, let's stop playing with that. Let's see. Did it complain in my thing? Thing one unfavorite. Favs thing. Oh, I know why. Duh. I'm doing a GET request. There is no GET request. Come back. Yeah. You can't always put it in a browser and make it work. Teach me a lesson, right? There's no def GET. And I can make it work, but that's a GET request. And so it's like, sorry, there ain't even a GET request here. Okay, so high level, we get the thing's primary key, we load the thing, we create a link, we create an object to put into fav with the two pieces, and we try to save it and don't really care if we've inadvertently double saved it because our UI is sort of keeping us from causing that to happen. Okay? So that's the favorite. The delete favorite is even easier. Right? So in delete favorite, we're CSRF exempt. We have to be logged in because if you're not logged in, then request user is going to blow up. This line's going to blow up because request user is not necessarily set if you don't have login required. So that's why we drop login required mix in right here. And then we load up the old thing. And that's because we need to put it in this effect filter. So this is like a where clause in SQL. Fav objects get user equals the current logged in user and thing equals T. T was the primary key of that thing. So if we can get it, then we delete it. Now, if again somebody manually found their way to the unfavorite button, even though we've hit it cleverly, they could still find their way, or a web browser might find its way. We're like, okay, we tried to delete it, it's not there, there's nothing bad, we'll just kind of fav not, it does not exist, and we're going to pass. And then we return an HTTP response, which is, in effect, emptiness. So when we come here, go to the network, refresh, clear everything, unclear it, right? There is nothing there. So we returned an HTTP response, but the most important thing is that we sent back a 200. So this, implicit when you're doing this is there is a 200 going back. And so it is successful. Okay. And so I think that this is pretty much all I have to cover on this, how to build a favorites. The quick way to test this is you should be able to turn these things on and off and watch the network tab. And then if you hit refresh, these two things, the state of these should be the same, meaning that you've properly recorded them in the database. So when I had it breaking, I would hide it and then I would refresh it and the little orange star would come back. So I hope this was helpful to you. A helpful little walkthrough going through the favorite sample code. Cheers. Hello and welcome to another walkthrough for Django for Everybody. In this walkthrough, we're going to take a look at the sample code called well. The name well is based on a long time early pre-internet forum in Berkeley, California, and so you can go look up the well. So the basic idea of the well is it looks exactly like MyArts. It's pretty much a clone of MyArts. So if you recall MyArts, you had articles CRUD, article submit, article CRUD, delete, just a basic article CRUD, right? So the only difference between this and the well is there's a search box here. So I can search for things that have yada in them, and then I can clear the search box. And that's it. So first, let's observe something that we can observe from the outside. When I do a search, the search is a get parameter. And the reason for that is that we want this, get parameters are get URLs are idempotent. So that basically says go to my blog and find all the blog posts that mention 1, 2, 3. So I could put that in as clear my search here, and I could do let's search for DSS DSS search here. So that is, this URL is the search for the ones that are DSS. So now I've bookmarked both these, and now that is going to be a short link to the ones that say DSS. So what I'm going to do is clear this search now, and this will show you something about idempotent URLs. I'm going to say yada 456, I was here, submit. So now I have two that have the word yada in the title, but watch what happens when I go to the URL that I bookmark. So I see now two posts. So the key of idempotent is not that you get the exact same page, you get the exact same logical page, not the exact same text every time. It's not like a cache that just clones the text. I go to this before, and then I go to it now, and if I then delete this one, and then I go to this again, that's the ones that have yada in them. And so that's why we're going to do a search for yada. And it's really quite simple here. I'll show you everything, but let's just start with an inspect element so you can see what's going on here. The first little trick here is you can construct that URL, and this goes way back. This goes way back to a form without a method equals post, which means it's a get method, which means that this name equals search becomes, it just goes on and it does a get request. So instead of doing a post request, which we've been doing for weeks now, this does a get request and it adds a get parameter. Okay, and so we've got in our view, our main view that is well, we're seeing a get parameter. It is not a different view. We're getting a view with a get parameter. And that also means that if I inspect element on this little undo icon that I made, inspect, all I'm doing is I'm making a link to /well without the parameter. So it's super easy. So like get rid of the search is just go to a different URL. I could have done it with, well, it is an anchor tag. It's a href tag. Look, So I've just gone to well, and it's not there. It's the same view. So searching, and if you were to go and take a look at how Amazon or Google, they do search, they're forever putting that stuff in the URL so that you can then bookmark them. And so I'll get rid of those I'll get rid of those bookmarks later, but you see how that is idempotent. That's the get. When I said weeks ago, I said get URLs are idempotent. I can now sort of show you in code that we're writing how that works. Okay, so let's take a look at our code. I'll clear my search here. The code here is pretty straightforward. We've got a really simple model that was pretty much taken straight from the MyArts code. This is like it's got a name. I called it post instead of articles because I've got all these applications running at the same time, so I have to change a few names here and there. Related name is when we're poking a lot of we're putting a lot of foreign keys into owner across my Django project. So you got to be careful to choose a name for related names so you don't end up with a collision. You can't just say owner or whatever. So I call this post owner so that you don't, back in the owner model, back in this model right here, the auth user model, we're pushing, in effect, methods or attributes into that model. And so we got to name them. And so this related name is really quite important to make sure across all of my applications. And what I mean is by all, these are all applications in one giant Django project. So this name here wants to be, and lots of these applications are using owner. And they're making a foreign key into the auth model, which is perfectly okay. It's just you got to be careful about the related name. Okay, so that's why that's there. So let's take a look at the urls.py. The main URL that we're going to change is this one, right? It's the list view, and here it is in the list view. And I don't know which way to go first here. Let's compare and contrast this list view with the views in MyArts. So in MyArts, the list view, I could just borrow owner list view, which was like extended generic list view, and I just say my model's article, and it was good. But now I got to do a whole bunch more work here. So I actually am going to, and I might have been able to do this by sort of overriding a few methods like we have done in the past, but I just decided that I would simply write all the code. And so I'm just extending view here. So I'm only extending view to make post list view. I'm still following the pattern so I can say what the model is. I'm not sure I even use that. Let's see if I use model. Yeah, I don't even need that. Template. Am I using that? It was kind of, yeah, so I'm using the template name here. So I still am going to use the template name. But I didn't need the model because the reason I didn't need the model is I'm just explicitly using post in all the places. And so just get that. So it's not, I mean, I don't like code that does nothing. It's always a mistake. Okay, so the GET request. Most of this is in a GET request. There is no post here because in the list view, which is this view, there is no post. This form is a GET request. That's a GET request. And all it does is we are going to do a GET request, and we're going to do two versions of that GET request. And we're going to have one version of the GET request based on whether there's a search GET parameter or not. So we're basically saying go grab a GET parameter, get the GET parameter using the GET method of a dictionary. The big uppercase GET is the dictionary, and lowercase GET is the name of the method in Python. Search is the key, and then default is false. If we get a string, then we've got to search and filter. But let's start with this. All we're doing here is we're grabbing the objects, and this is the kind of code that is done automatically in owner list view, which is then generic list view, right? So this is just, I'm just doing the code. Now the thing I get to do with this that's really nice is I can go through and augment this object list. Now, so this is a list of objects, and I'm going to change each object. and I'm going to add a field. Oops, undo, undo, undo. I don't know what I just did. Undo, undo, undo. Okay, that I want to keep. So this is an object. So objects is a list of objects, and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to add a field. So you can sort of in the middle, you can add this natural dash updated, and I'm going to base it on updated at, which is the long ugly looking date. It's a real date, but it's a long ugly looking date, and I'm going to run that through the natural time filter, which again is something built into Django that puts in this 15 hours ago thing, which is much nicer than just putting the date out. Okay. And so we're going to send the objects in this post list, which is the list of objects, and then we're going to send the string, the search value in, just so we can show that. Yeah, so that when we want to see this yada, so you can actually change this, right? So we want to put this back in, right? So we're going to pass that into the template, and then we're going to render the template. Dump queries is code just to show the queries that are actually being run if I was running this locally. So let's take a look at the code. So for most of this, literally, it's the same thing. Okay. So it's basically looping through. It's doing a little bit more tricky stuff here. If the text is less than 100, I'm putting it all in. And in the list, I'm only going to put so if the post is less, the length is less than 100, slice is 0.99. How come I can't see that? Yeah. Oh, that's because I'm not the owner. That's because I'm not the owner. Posted by DJ Free Samples. Who am I in this situation? Well, let's add a post. A title. Zap. 1, 2, 3. Submit. Yeah, so it's showing this detail. That's what I was confused about. See this little detail? Oops, not with that end if. That post text length greater than 100. So there's actually a bug in this code right here. And since I'm running it on samples, it'll take me a while to get it updated. But I'll just point out that there's a bug here and I want to fix it. Because this if post owner ID, that's our standard like to show the edit and delete. And I inadvertently had this code that's showing the actual text. This is what I wanted to look like. I wanted a title and I wanted a short summary. So you'd have to go into here to get the whole summary, but the short summary of the text. So this code, when you run it again, you will see, after I update all this and push it through GitHub and run it in production, I will fix this, okay? And so that is what makes this, to keep that nice and short. 99 might be too long of a thing. I'd rather that stuck to one line, but whatever. Posted by the username in this case. There's the username. That's nice. And a URL into the post detail. So this is really straightforward stuff other than that little cool bit there of putting the summary in. But the only thing we really have added here is this form. And we are going to do a form. It's going to, because we haven't said action equals on the form tag, it is going to post right back to the same URL that it came to. I mean, not post, it's going to do a get because there's no method equals post here. It is going to get right back to this same URL. And I have the input with a placeholder. The placeholder is what gives me this little searchy bit thing. See that? It's not really the string search. It's a placeholder if it's empty. And then I have value equals, oh no, undo. Value equals search here, which is taking the old search value. Old search value. Ooh, Zap was there. And so that's putting Zap back in there. And of course, it's escaping it. And so if we were, there's no HTML entities problem here, or whatever. And I put this in an if, right? And that you don't have to put these on separate lines. You see me doing a lot of that where I'm having the if and end if on separate lines. But here I just have it like right in the middle of a line, and that just is going to emit that text in the middle of that line. I'm using a font awesome icon for the search so that I get this little search button. That's kind of cute. That's a thing called Font Awesome. You can go look that up. And then I have a link that goes back to well:all. I could probably call this like request.path or something, because it's really would be the same thing. Instead of URL well:all, I could just go back to the request path, which would be /well/, but it doesn't matter. Well:all is nice. And then I throw another font awesome in there, which gives me a little undo thing. And we've been using these little font awesome creatures for a while now. And so that's really all that is needed to get this new bit of user interface into the output. And so really the only thing left to show you is the code where it handles the search. So there is a filter. So post objects all order by, that's what happens if it's not searching. So what you see here is all we've done is instead of saying all, we say filter. And there's a couple of ways you can do filters. You can do like just if you're doing one field, this is a really funky syntax. It uses 2 underscores. Title is a field in models.py, right? Title is a field in models.py. Double underscore contains, that is like an operator, and then this is a string value, which is just a string here in our Python code. Now I want to actually search through both the title and the text. So I'm going to have to make myself a combined search. So I'm going to make a query. And I'm going to use this dbModelsQ, which means I can create a query in, and I could do it in a really long, yucky query there, but I'm going to start with a query that says the title contains the string, and then I'm going to add to that an OR clause. We're stuck in Python, right? It's not SQL. We're stuck in Python, so we got to have this funky thing. So this says, these two things create a thing that basically says, if the title contains that string, whatever it was, zap, if the title contains that string, or if the text contains that string, select it. And now instead of all, I put filter query, so I pull the query in. And then select related. This is an efficiency thing that says, look, I'm going to actually look at all the data. So run that whole filter, run the username, do a bunch of stuff. So I got a comment toward the bottom of this that talks about select related, and then the order by, and then show me just the first 10. That's the same. And there we go. And then we augment that, and then away we go. And so search is either, in this case, search is either the get request from the former get, this is that value in this particular instance, or it is false. And then that triggers, of course, this bit of code in the template. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I certainly probably over-talked it. It's not that complex. And then so I want to show you only one more thing for this before we wrap it up, and that is a new pattern. So you'll notice if you look in here, there is only one view. There is just the post list view. And if we take a look at articles, we've got these views, the detail view, the create view, the update view, and the delete view. And they all extend owner create view and then just change these variables. I overwrote this list view because I had a whole bunch of other things I wanted to do that owner list view wasn't going to do for me, right? And so, but you'll notice that in the well, I don't have those. So let me show you how these are, and you'll notice I have edit views, right? I got them, they're still there. And there are templates. CD templates, well, the templates are there, okay? And as a matter of fact, in this one, I changed the default name of the templates because I'm kind of tired of putting underscores in front of certain things. But let me show you how I solved the problem of where are the views. They're actually fully in urls.py. So here is, so I import owner list view, owner detail view, owner create view, and owner update view. And so what I'm saying is map the post/int pk, which of course is the detail file, right? Post int pk. And I would like you to call owner detail view, which is a class that's come from myarts.owner, as view, And then you can put a series of key value pairs in that override the default values of, say, model and template name. And so I'm saying models equals models.post. I know that. That's the name of my model, right? And then template name equals, and now I'm even I'm taking the app name, which happens to be sitting conveniently in a string here, and concatenating it to detail/HTML. And so that is the view. And of course, name equals is just part of the URLs thing. And you'll notice that when I do the create view, I set the success URL, the model, the template. And now remember, I want to hide some of the fields. I want to show which fields are there and which fields aren't. Right? And so if we look at this views, you see like which fields you actually want to show, because I don't want to show the created at, etc., and the updated at, right? In the models, I don't want to put owner out. I don't want to put created at out. So I'm going to give a list. I'm going to give a list. Come back. I'm going to give a list of the fields I want to show on my create form. So again, these are sort of class-wide variables that turn into object instance variables when it makes this view, and it overrides all these things. And so all the stuff that I was doing in views.py, I am now doing in urls.py and just reusing owner create view. And you see an update, delete, they're all kind of there, right? And so I don't actually need to put the views in. And this is really, it looks a little more complex, but I think it's a lot prettier than putting these silly views in over and over. So that's a pattern that you may want to use. It made it easier for me to rename from well to something else if I wanted to, because really well is only hard-coded one place in here. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so there's a couple of lessons here. You know, one is this searching. One is the search and how that works, but then also a new way to create views that never really leave urls.py. You could build, and remember, I built this owner detail view to meet my needs. So things like template view, that's something that is just a bunch of code somebody wrote. So, okay, well, I hope this walkthrough of the well sample application has been useful to you. Cheers.